Hey everybody, Mo here, and today I'm bringing you guys another deck tech, competitive deck tech, and deck guide, whatever you want to call them. And this one's going to be on Lee Sin. So Lee Sin's a deck that I've been working with a few people to kind of optimize and play because I think it's very strong. I think Lee Sin is a stronger Master Yi. Once you kind of build it correctly and get the numbers kind of figured out, I think Master Yi is much stronger right now, or was stronger in the early metagame just because of how easy he is to build. The amount of numbers that the Master is able to produce is going to be better than a huge majority of unrefined decks right now. They're just simply not going to be able to have the numbers because you built poorly or didn't build in a way to maximize your numbers. And Master Yi just does that for you without deck choice. So that's what the point of this video is. A quick call to action to subscribe as always. I say as always, like the second time ever I've done that because you guys have been enjoying my content a lot. I've grown a lot. I really appreciate you guys through all of this, and I just want to remind you, maybe you watch my videos or see them in your feed and you click on them but you haven't subscribed. That's perfectly fine. I just want to remind you that if you hit the subscribe button and bell, it's free. You can always change it later if you end up not liking the content I put out, but it helps me as a creator in a lot of ways, and it also will make sure that you don't miss anything, like a deck tech, a VOD review, a scrim review, a scrim, anything really, right, that I would be doing on here and giving you all the information. Second thing is my Metify. Metify launched yesterday, or it's been launched, but I actually put up stuff on Metify that is stuff like coaching, membership, what the membership includes, and all of that. And go check that out if you're interested in getting a head start. I announced the first huge Riftbound tournament that's already been announced, cash prize tournament for this weekend, and that's it, or not this weekend, sorry, for this game, and it's going to be happening in December 12th through the 14th, meaning there's about 3 months now until that tournament happens, about 3.5 months. So if you want to get a head start on everyone that's not starting or learning the game until November, when the game finally launches, make sure to check out my Metify, get coaching on that. Think about subscribing for $5 a month. You get a weekly free video that I'll be posting. It's going to be a scrim, like a full scrim video. It's like a look into how competitive players scrim. It'll be mostly unedited, probably completely unedited, because our scrim sessions are usually a few hours and I don't want to go through and edit those. So you get the full kind of like unedited raw version of what it looks like to be in a competitive scrim environment, whether we are refining a deck, trying to figure out a matchup, any of those scenarios. You get one of those a week for free. I'll be posting on my Metify. It's just going to be to the member subscribers that are the $5 a week tier, as well as I will be randomly selecting two members a week for a VOD review, and I will be putting up that VOD review again just for the members to see, and then there is a chance that your VOD gets picked. There will be a place in my Discord for you to submit a VOD. Discord and Metify are linked to each other, so if you're a subscriber on Discord, I have a special channel that shows you where you can submit your VOD, and then I will just randomly select two. I have a random number generator. We'll select two of them for me. I will completely VOD review a game or potentially a match. We'll see how long they go. If you have a best of 3 from a tournament you played or a weekly you played or anything, as well as if I don't do 2 VOD reviews, I'm thinking of doing 1 VOD review and then like 1 deck review or a deck kind of optimizing type deal. So if you have a deck you're really liking or saying, hey, I'm playing this deck and it's not going well for me, or these are the issues I have, can you help me out here? One of those, and those are not free because it is the $5 a week subscription, but that's a lot of value you get out of $5 if yours gets picked, as well as you just get to see a lot of content and you still get a lot of advice that you can see me giving to other people's decks or other people's games that will help you as well. It's kind of like a free coaching VOD that you get to sit in on. If I'm coaching someone else or doing a VOD review for someone else, but you get to sit in on it for $5 a month, that's pretty sick, considering you'll get to do 4 of those, as well as there's a discount for coaching for the subscribers, all that stuff. It's a lot of value, and it's really nice if your goal is to become the best Riftbound player you can, or if your goal has anything to do with competitive Riftbound and getting to a certain level. This is going to be one of the best ways to do it by starting early. I have a lot of coaching experience. I'm a much better coach than I am player. I enjoy coaching much more than I enjoy casting or playing. It is just something I'm extremely passionate about and have enjoyed it, being an analyst and on the analyst desk for Riot Games for their previous card game was the most enjoyable experience I had and really taught me how much I just love coaching and giving advice, and that's why I have this YouTube channel. If I wanted to be the biggest Riftbound YouTube channel, I would probably focus on commander content, because that's where the most player base is going to be. You know, it'll be the most monetarily beneficial, make me the most subscribers, all that, but I enjoy this content because I enjoy this community, and this is the content that I personally just love making for you guys. So go check that out. Again, a lot of value. If it's not for you, understand. I don't have any other tiers than the $5 tier, so if it's anything past that, obviously you can choose to donate or do whatever you want to, but I'll still have free guides. Don't worry, I'll have free sideboard guides. I'm going to be doing more paid stuff in the future, like preparing for tournaments. Whenever the big tournaments are around the corner, probably a week before or so, or a few days before, a week before, I'm going to be hosting a session on Metify where it's effectively a live stream on there, where you can, you know, pay to sit in, you get a seat, and then I'm going to be talking probably with 1 to 2 other competitive players that are either working with me or going to the tournament with me as well, and we're going to talk about, break down what the meta we think it is. I'll share the deck that I'm going to be playing, all of that type of stuff. So it gives you a lot of insights and can really help you get that last minute preparation in for the tournament, if that's something that you're looking forward to. And it'll be live, so I can do all Q&A. If you want me, I'll be reviewing people's decks, so there's a chance I can get to your deck before the tournament and tell you, you know, what things I would change or what things I would look out for, all that type of stuff. So I know that was a really long intro. I promise I'm trying to keep these intros short. That's just a really huge announcement for me that I'm really excited for, and wanted to let you guys know that it is dropping, or it dropped yesterday. So go check that out. Link is description below, metify.gg/@emotional, EMOE channel, just like my channel is named. But that's it. That's enough shilling and all that type of stuff. Let's get into the actual deck tech. The reason you guys are here. Again, strap in if you're new here. This is your first one. TLDR, this is going to be a long video. It's probably going to be around an hour long. I'm going to be really in depth here, going over every single card choice, going over more card choices that aren't even in here, the concept behind the deck, how you come back from point deficits, the point tempo loss ideas, the reasons behind each card as far as the matchups they're in for, the ratios, because that's going to be the #1 question I get, is the ratioing on everything, all that fun stuff. So strap in. I will be talking about this in a way to where you can just listen. So if you have something to do, if you're you have a chore you're doing, studying, driving, anything like that, effectively treat this like a podcast, because anytime I talk about a card or point out a card on the stream, I will say the name out loud, I'll read the ability out loud. You don't have to worry about any of that stuff. So strap in. It's going to be a fun one. There will be a TLDR at the very end, most likely, if that's all you're interested in. If you just want to pick up Lee Sin and play it at your local because he looks cool and you like buff shirtless men, you know, hit me up. But also, it will be a TLDR at the end there. Just kidding, I'm not buff. So the first thing we'll go over is why Lee Sin. That's the biggest question. Why play Lee Sin over Master Yi Mo? There is already an orange-green legend that is good. It's already good. It's already winning tournaments. Or it hasn't won anything yet, but it's won like locals and stuff, but it's coming in second in both majors we've had so far in China. It's had a really good play rate, a fairly decent conversion rate. It's making up like half of the top 8 both times, I'm pretty sure. Like, it's doing really well. So why play Lee Sin? The biggest reason is I don't think Master Yi is actually that good. I think Master Yi is very good right now, where people's decks aren't optimized and people's decks cannot put out sufficient numbers. This has been my take for about a week or two after seeing these Master Yi decks play, and after starting to optimize these. You know, I'm not the first to have this take, and Casanova from Turn 'em Sideways was one of the first people I've heard say this, where Lee Sin is just better Master Yi. In the early, it was really hard to believe them, because Master Yi was doing so well and it puts up so much numbers. But as we started refining decks, as I started refining decks and looking into decks, it really did turn out that you can make really good Lee Sin numbers. You can make really good numbered decks in general. You have to find answers to the question of, can you deal with my unit outside of combat? And a lot of decks can do that fairly well. And once you start refining decks and answering those questions, Master Yi is still good. It will probably never drop out of like an A tier slot, like a can potentially win tournament slot. But I think it'll be really hard to convince people to play Master Yi over Lee Sin in the long run, I believe. So let's get into why I think that the deck, I already said why I think that. Let's get into the deck numbers, the cards of what I think makes Lee Sin better and why it's doing things better than Master Yi, as well as I'll get into a little bit of my testing. So I'm just going to start top to bottom. We will look at the Lee Sin champion. He is orange and green, and then says, I'm sorry, I don't know the names of these. I think it's Calm. I know it's Calm. Oh, they're right here. Calm and Body. They're on the fancy runes. So Calm and Body, orange and green. And it says 1 energy, tap Lee Sin, or tap your legend for 1 energy, buff a friendly unit, and then a buff, for those of you who don't know, is kind of like a +1/+1 counter from other games like Magic the Gathering, except in this game, units can only have 1 buff, 1 +1/+1 counter at a time. Of course, our chosen champion, Lee Sin, changes that, and he gets around this rule thanks to his ability. But every other unit in the game can only have 1 buff token, +1/+1 token on them. Now, it gets very confusing with verbiage, where buff also is used for spells that give your unit might, like on guard here. On guard says, when I give a friendly unit +1 might this turn, then another +1 might, if it's the only unit you control there. So people will say, play on guard, buff my unit +2. That is also a buff, but just know that if I'm ever talking about a buff, I will probably try and say buff token. So I'll say, like, a friendly unit can only have 1 buff token at a time, so that way it can become less confusing with the terminology of buff token and a buff from a spell. I don't know why Riot chose the word buff. I don't think that was the smartest decision, but it will work out, I'm sure, in the long run. People won't. So yeah, we're playing Lee Sin Legend. That's what the Legend ability does. He buffs things. He gives things +1/+1 counters. Your chosen champion can have infinite +1/+1 counters. So that's why this does this, as well as there are a lot of cards that say, when I have X amount of might, give me a bunch of abilities, or if I have a buff token specifically, I gain a bunch of abilities or do a bunch of crazy stuff. And that is a nice way to turn them on for 1 energy, thanks to your Lee Sin Legend. So you can effectively look at all those and you know exactly how to evaluate it. For example, the 6 energy, 6 might unit that says when I have a buff counter on it, I gain ganking. You just look at it and say, okay, it's effectively a 7 energy, 7 might unit with ganking. That's a pretty fair rate. That's a pretty decent rate, So it makes it really easy to evaluate that type of stuff. We're not really playing those in this style of deck, but that's what the Lee Sin champion does. Our rune split is 6/6. This is not fully optimized. I think personally, 6/6 is probably pretty close to correct. I think it depends on the sideboard, most likely, as to which one you will lean more towards. If your sideboard is more orange or more green, you probably end up playing like a 7-5 split is most likely what's going to happen. I don't have the sideboard figured out at all. I've not messed with the sideboard because the sideboard is 100% meta dependent, and green and orange have so many tools to use right now in the meta sideboarding. I've not even bothered it, but I wanted to get the deck out to you guys now that it's been mostly optimized, or the idea has at least been optimized and theorized and thought out, and has been performing pretty decently in scrims. Next is the battlefields. Battlefields are the same way. They're extremely easy to change. Therefore, I don't put a whole lot of time and energy into figuring out the perfect 3 battlefields. For the most part, decks will want 1 to 2 specific battlefields. Sometimes there are just 3 specific battlefields that you always play, but for the most part, that's not really true. 1 to 2 specific ones, though, can be fairly true and very common. And Lee Sin, we do have 2 that I think that are pretty staple for him that I think you will most likely always be taking with Lee Sin decks, and that is going to be the Dreaming Tree, which is a battlefield that says the first time you choose a friendly unit with a spell here each turn, draw 1 card. So this is really nice for us because we play a lot of spells that target our unit, whether it is buffing our unit or I think it's just buffing our unit, basically, is what we do in this deck. We can ready our unit with Wallop as a spell that you can do, but 99% of the time, we're just buffing our unit with a buff spell, giving it plus some amount of might. Now notice, this does say the first time you choose a friendly unit with a spell here does not work for abilities, so you cannot just go 1 energy, tap your Lee Sin Legend, give a unit a buff token on this battlefield, draw a card. Not how that works. It would be really broken if it worked on abilities, because things like Pookie would just come down, give a buff token to a unit on that battlefield, and then you also drew a card. Kind of absurd. So it is just when you use a spell. The other battlefield, and probably the most standard battlefield I think you will have to use on every Lee Sin deck, is the Monastery of Harana. Says when you conquer here, you may spend a buff to draw a card. So this is nice in the early to mid game to be able to just play a cheap unit, give it a buff token with your Lee Sin. I should say, let me clarify. It says when you conquer here, you may spend a buff token to draw a card, not just a buff. If you give your unit +2 with the discipline and then conquer, you cannot remove the +2 might to draw a card. It's talking about buff tokens. So it's really nice in the early game. Like I said, we are a go second deck, which I will get into with play patterns in a moment. So go second deck means we will play a 2-mana unit, 2 energy unit on turn 1, give it a buff with Lee Sin. Turn 2, we will ready everything, conquer Hirana, the monastery, remove the buff immediately to draw a card if we want to, because we have buffs at our disposal thanks to our legend. We always have a buff to give, so we can remove a buff to draw a card, and then if we need to or want to, immediately spend 1 energy to rebuff the unit so it can have a better chance at holding or reactivate its ability or whatever, however we're trying to do with it, right? So that is a really nice battlefield I think is holding. The third battlefield I have right now is Targon's Peak. I think this one is also fairly important for Lee Sin, but I think can be changed. I think the Dreaming Tree and the Targon's Peak are the 2 that can be changed. Probably Dreaming Tree more than Targon's Peak, because I like the having 2 runes ready. The entire point behind this deck, which I'll get into in a moment, is protect the president, essentially. So we are going to play a Lee Sin or a Qiyana, and just try and have this really big, efficient unit that we are going to take the game over with. Most of the time that's going to be with Lee Sin. And having extra runes untapped thanks to Targon's Peak at the end of your turn makes it really, really hard for your opponent to interact with you when you are in the colors of orange and green. 2 runes is a lot. 2 runes is any of your excuse me, any of your reaction spells. So it's going to be any of your Disciplined, your Defy, your Unguard, your I think those are the only reaction spells I'm playing here. It's also just enough for almost any of your spells in general. So it's enough for your Rune Prison, it's enough for your Block, it's enough for, again, you know, Defy, it's enough for I guess Unyielding Spirit is one of them. The only spell it really doesn't pay for is going to be your Stand United, and then if you end up playing something like a Primal Strength, your Primal Strength. But it still pays 2/3 for your Stand United, plus Stand United is a hidden card anyways, so most likely you're just going to play it for 1 rune and be fine. So untapping makes it really easy to interact with your opponent and stop them from killing your big presidential champion that you're playing. It makes it easy to do something like on turn 3. The best curve here is when you go turn 1, you're on 3 energy, you play a 2 energy unit and then you buff it, and then turn 2 you conquer Targon's Peak, which allows you to ready 2 runes at the end of your turn. You get to immediately play a Lee Sin on turn 3 and then have 2 mana open at the end of your turn and be able to protect the Lee Sin the turn that he comes into play, which is really hard and usually the biggest thing that Kaisa and other decks can't deal with. Their only shot at really beating Lee Sin and killing him is killing the Lee Sin the turn he comes down with a Falling Star. Sorry, I don't know why I couldn't think of the name there. With the Falling Star, or if you have a pump spell, something like a Falling Star plus a Smokescreen. There's like the only ways they can actually deal with this Lee Sin champion. If they allow you to play Lee Sin on turn 2 and then untap with full runes available with your Lee Sin, they've kind of lost the game, because you don't even need to attack with the Lee Sin immediately. But what you do is you just go spend 1 energy, give it a buff token with your legend, tap the Lee Sin, give itself a buff token. Now it's a 7 might unit. Now Falling Star alone doesn't kill it. So they already had to go Falling Star with the second spell. The second spell can get defied. We have On Guard. We have a main deck Unyielding Spirit. You have Unyielding Spirits on the side. You have Discipline for buffs. You know, you can play Azonias on your turn. There's a whole lot of stuff you can do, and it just becomes really impossible for your opponent to kill the Lee Sin. And then if you untap twice with the Lee Sin, the game is like actually over, because instead of going from 5 might to 7 might, he will now go to 9 might, and Kaisa can't deal with the 9 might unit. We know that. This is why Aurora, one of the reasons why Aurora is such a bad matchup for Kaisa. But the other thing is Aurora doesn't play pump spells, they don't play counter spells, they don't play a lot of interaction as green does, so that is going to make it a lot deadlier. And then of course if you get a second Lee Sin, you just start getting to make 2 guys really big every turn, and it's going to be a problem and scale really quickly, really fast. If you ever have a Stand United on your Lee Sin, it's just kind of impossible for your opponent to ever kill a Lee Sin or interact with it. You'll beat Fox, you beat Darius Cleave, you beat Fox Cleave, all of that fun stuff, right? So that's why the Targon's Peak is very good, because it lets you have those 2 runes ready immediately if you get that curve of unit on turn 1, a Conquer Peak on turn 2, untap 2 runes to protect your Lee Sin. It can get out of hand really quickly. So that's it for the battlefields and the legend. Now, before we talk about the actual cards, I'm going to go into the game plan of this deck. I said I don't have the sideboard figured out because it's too much. I do have, I think this main board is fairly figured out. I'm not saying it's perfect. I think there are a couple of cards that can be changed. There are some cards in here that are, again, for the specific meta happening right now, where Kaisa is the most dominant deck, the strongest deck, and the most popular deck. So that is obviously influencing some of the card choices here. And then overall, I think there is going to be some more optimizations depending on the meta and what cards you may need or want more of. But the entire concept of this deck is, it is called President Lee Sin is the name of the deck. Coined by me because I'm original and no one else has thought of that. And Lee Sin, the goal is to just keep your Lee Sin alive. Lee Sin and Kiana. These are your two presidents. We don't play the Udyrs in the main deck. We don't play like Setts in the main deck, Misfortunes. Any other units are only quote-unquote real units that we care about and want to invest a bunch of energy into and cards into saving and protecting are Kiana and Lee Sin. And that's because if those units live long enough and you can get value out of them for a couple of turns, it will usually generate a big enough value lead and resource lead that you can just run away with the game or just win the game before your opponent can really get going at all. Your biggest one is going to be the Lee Sin Legend or the Lee Sin Champion. Because he's your chosen champion, makes it really easy. You can just play him on turn 2 100% of the time. And then with extra copies in your deck, you have a fairly good shot at drawing a second Lee Sin by turn 3 or turn 4 if you're hard mulliganing for it, which you should be doing. You should be hard mulliganing for your Lee Sins, because in any game where you slam down a Lee Sin on 2 and they don't kill it, you're super far ahead. But any game where you slam down a Lee Sin on 2 and they do have exactly like Falling Star, right? Or they have like their one card in their deck that can kill a Lee Sin in your base on turn 2. If you can immediately chain a third or a second Lee Sin on turn 3 right after it, and then you have 1 energy to protect it or 1 energy to give it a buff with a buff token with your Lee Sin Legend or anything like that, the games are really over because it's hard for your opponent to come back from that. Your Lee Sin's going to grow really big, and the biggest point at that point is making up the like 2-point deficit, potentially 3 at the worst point deficit that you're at. But we have cards in here, and this is built to try and minimize the that issue, right? So that's the game plan. Just protect your Lee Sin. So we're not playing a whole lot of units. We are playing a total of 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. We were playing 18 units total, which is less than half of our deck, which sounds like a lot because it's like, oh, dude, that's like half your deck. That's not a lot. 18 units is not a lot of units at all, especially when we say it's air quotes 18 units, but realistically, we only have 6 to 8 real units that we care about, which are going to be the 3 Kiana, the 3 Lee Sin, and then potentially the 2 Sunlit Guardian are units that are potentially worth saving and investing into depending on the matchup and the spot that you're in. The other units are all there as like supportive units or serve they serve a specific role in your deck that isn't to win you the games. It's usually to do things like get points earlier, stop your opponent from getting a 3-point lead, make your unit bigger, help with like tempo, untap your Lee Sin to help with the point deficit. Blitzcrank is to like pull your opponent's units and punish them for developing and stuff like that, right? To clear the board and have board control. So they all have their own roles. There's only 6 units in here that actually work, and their role is to win the game. That's the 3 Kianas and 3 Lee Sins. So that's the game plan. Now that we understand the game plan, I will go through each card in the deck list, and this will be the long part. Some of them are very simple. I will say like, oh, discipline, it gives you +2. Good stuff. No, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go in depth as to why I have the ratioing of the cards I do in here, the actual like specific purposes and scenarios for the cards, and all of that stuff, instead of just saying like, yep, Rune Prison, stun unit, make combat hard, thumbs up. You guys know that. You guys know that stunning a unit makes combat hard for them. You don't need, some guy with glasses on a screen to tell you that, right? I'll tell you why it's in here, all that fun stuff. So we'll start from top to bottom. The other way to do this, I think I'm actually going to start with Lee Sin and then Kiana, because those are the 2 main pieces of the deck, and then I'll go through the rest of the deck, because this entire deck effectively revolves around Lee Sin and Kiana, sometimes Sunlit Guardian, but Lee Sin and Kiana, right? So we'll go over those first because it's important. 5 energy, Lee Sin, Ascetic. Ascetic? I don't know, Ascetic, I think. Lee Sin aesthetic gets green Lee Sin, 5 energy, 1 power for a 5 might unit. It has shield 1, so you get +1 might while it is a defender. He has an ability that says exhaust him to give him a buff token, give himself a buff token. And then he has an ability that says I can have any number of buff tokens. So this is why we're investing so much time and resources into Lee Sin and why he becomes such a problem so quickly. Because you have the 1 energy every turn can effectively make your Lee Sin +2 might every turn, because you spend 1 energy on your Lee Sin legend to give your Lee Sin champion a buff token, and then you can exhaust your Lee Sin champion to give himself a buff token. And he very quickly just gets out of hand. I know saying like, oh, if you untap with him once, he becomes a 7, and then if you need to and you tap him a second time, that makes him a 9, he's unkillable. 7 is already like fairly close to unkillable. 8 is extremely like 8 is considered big in this game, right? There's not very many units that are bigger than 8. I think there's like 4 total or something, or 5 total units in this game that are bigger than 8 might. So 8 might is considered big, which is just untapping, one time, going tap my Lee Sin champion, give himself a buff token, spend 1 energy, Lee Sin legend, give himself a buff token, boom, he's at 7, untap again, and then you just go 1 energy, make my Lee Sin legend, give him a buff token, he's at 8. That's already beating a lot of the boards. While he is at 8 already, he's actually a 9 while defending because of his shield 1, so he's even bigger while defending, which is how you'll use him most games, is you'll make him really large, you'll attack a battlefield, and then he will just be so big that your opponent can't attack into him, even with a Fox, thanks to other spells that we have in our deck that we'll get to. And that is the entire purpose behind this Lee Sin legend, and why this deck can function is because this green Lee Sin is your chosen champion, so you will always have him at your disposal on turn 2 or on turn 3 once you have the energy available to help protect him. And then the other main champion we're playing here, other unit, is Kiana. She is a champion. And she is 4 energy, 1 power, 4 might with deflect, so opponents have to pay a power every time they choose her with the spell or ability. And then her ability says, when I conquer, draw 1 card or channel 1 rune exhausted. So she can either ramp you, if your hand is really good or you have a lot of cards in your hand, she can ramp you energy and ramp you runes, so that way you can play out your Lee Sin safely and to be able to play your Lee Sin out to have more energy to defend him the next turn. Or if you have like Mist to fall out and you're recycling a rune every turn, you can, get that rune back with Kiana and start helping out your rune situation and be able to make sure you can play expensive cards or multiple spells later on to protect your unit. But most of the time she is used to draw cards just so you can keep up end card advantage and say like, hey, I'm just going to play this Kiana, draw a card, hope I draw into a protection spell or a charm or something, and just keep your unit alive. You'll be able to bring her back and do a whole bunch of other like really good stuff. That's why she's important. Also, the deflect keyword is huge, meaning if your opponent tries to falling star her on turn 2, which is a very common play pattern, is you go turn 2, you have 5 energy, going second, you just go play Kiana, tap an energy, Lee Sin, legend ability, buff your Kiana, she's 5 might already. Your opponent will most likely get scared or say, hey, I can't deal with this Kiana, or don't want to deal with this Kiana. If my Lee Sin opponent gets to ready all of their runes and untap and get more runes next turn and all the cards in their hand. So I'm going to go ahead and Falling Star it now. Falling Star will then cost your opponent 4 total runes and power to recycle. So even through Kaisa's ability to give 1 power to the Falling Star, your opponent is still recycling 3 runes. So you played this on your turn 2. It's your opponent's turn 3. They're going to have at most 6 runes in Kaisa on turn 3. You're making them recycle half of their runes away to kill the Kiana, which is crazy. And then if you do have 1 energy for the Unyielding Spirit at that point, your opponent gets fully blown out. Or if you were able to play if you're able to play like Azonia's on turn 1 and then turn 2 to a Kiana, now your opponent has to find a way to fight through the Zonia's Hourglass, which means reducing your Kiana's might. That's another rune exhausted, so now your opponent, rune recycled. So your opponent is recycling 4 total runes out of their 6 runes on turn 3, which is something they're not going to be happy about. They're going to start turn 4 with 4 runes total, and you're going to go into your turn 3 with 6 runes total. You're going to have 6 runes on your turn 3 to their 4 runes, and then when you go to turn 4, you're going to be at 7 runes to 8 runes, probably 7 runes most likely, because you're just going to play a Lee Sin from Champ Zone. Point being, you're going to have like double their runes for a couple of turns, which is just really absurd. And then if you continue to then play another Kiana or a Lee Sin or another threat that they have to Falling Star again at that point, or decide to let you live because they don't want to Falling Star, they're going to be getting rid of even more runes, which is going to be hard for them. And it just gets out of hand really quickly once you have this deflect unit in play and you're able to protect the Kiana. Right, so those are your two main champions. Those are the two main units that this deck is built around, and your goal is to protect them. Now we will get into every other card in this deck list, which is built around protecting these two units, three kind of with Sunlit Guard, right? So we'll just go top to bottom. Some of these will be quick. Some of these I will go in depth. If it is a crazy card or a weird ratio, I'll let you know why. First one is Defy. We are on 2 Defy, 2 copies of Defy. Counter target spell that costs no more than 4 energy and no more than 1 power. Only on 2 copies, mostly because I wanted to make room for a second anti-Kaisa card in the main deck, so I put in 1 Unyielding Spirit. Could have been like 2 Sabotage or anything like that. The 1 Unyielding could come out if Kaisa goes away or starts playing less damaging spells, which I don't think they will, especially in game 1s. And I think Defy will be better that way, because Defy is mostly a Kaisa card right now anyways. It's used to do things like counter smoke screens or stupefies or cleaves or something like that. So replacing a Defy with an Unyielding Spirit is still an anti-Kaisa card. It is just a harder counter to Kaisa's best card, which is Falling Star. Falling Star is the best card in Kaisa. It is the best card into us. The other option that they have as far as big removal into your Lee Sins and stuff is going to be Singularity, and Unyielding Spirit again just beats Singularity for 1 energy, which is really nice. It's just super easy to hold open 1 energy and tell your opponent, hey, are you going to try and Falling Star me? Cool, here's an Unyielding Spirit, like, get smoked. You know, what are you going to do about it? So 2 Defy doesn't hit a whole lot else in the meta right now, except for sometimes yellow decks, but 2 Defy is still great. You should be seeing 1 with the amount of card draw this deck has. You'll be seeing 1 per game, you know, on average. We're on 3 On Guard. On Guard effectively reads 1 energy, give a unit +2 might this turn, because you are almost always having the condition filled where it's the only unit being held there. If not, it's 1 energy +1 might is still okay in some spots and can be enough, but a huge majority of the time you're only ever playing this as a 1 energy, give a unit +2 might. It's, again, a spell to help protect our president. It's played in every deck right now because of how efficient it is. 1 energy for 2 is above rate and is very clean. Having 1 mana cards, 1 energy cards is very clean answers and very hard to play around. Next is Unyielding Spirit and Sabotage. I'm going to clump them together because they serve the same purpose, which is being anti-Kaisa tech and kind of anti-Aurora or anti-Misfortune specifically tech. Unyielding Spirit is a card that you sideboard in against every Kaisa, so why not just play 1 main deck if Kaisa is the most played deck in the game, as well as a very one of the best decks in the game. Just play 1 Unyielding Spirit in the main board anyways, and you're fine. You're probably only playing like 2 in the sideboard to begin with, so playing 1 in the main deck is going to be perfectly fine. It just makes you have 1 less sideboard slot that you're going to have to figure out to bring in the second Unyielding Spirit. You skip a step, you make your game 1 a lot better. Opponents are not playing around Unyielding Spirit in game 1 anyways, and it will just completely blow them out. And it feels really nice. It is good into Misfortune. It's obviously like not good into Sett. It's fine into Darius as well. The Darius hook decks are also playing Falling Star, and again, Unyielding Spirit just says, okay, cool, here's my answer to Falling Star. It is just one of the best protection spells into the best damaging or kill spell in the game right now, which is Falling Star. Right, so it makes sense to play 1 in the main deck, in my opinion. And then Sabotage is fairly similar. You can do 1 energy, Sabotage, look at your Kaisa opponent's hand, go, oh, cool, you have a Falling Star. Let me take that from you. Now I know I can play my Lee Sin safely here, and you can't do anything about it. The other option is to, you go, oh, you don't have a Falling Star in your hand? Cool, I will take that smoke screen. And now you don't have, 2 energy, 4 might, effect, like -4 might is a crazy rate. You don't have that anymore. So that's a really good uptrade for you as well. Again, into Aurora, Sabotage is taking an Aurora on turn 2 or turn 3 is going to be huge. Most decks have a Sabotage target, but we're only playing 1 Sabotage and 1 Smokescreen. Again, because if you happen to draw it, it's going to be good in those matchups, but you don't necessarily need it or even want to see it in every single game at every single board state. They are kind of cards where you need them in specific spots, and that's what a lot of 1-ups are. If you have them in specific spots that your opponent is not playing around, and you have it, you're going to dominate, and it's going to gain you a lot of value compared to if you're playing 3 of them always draw one on like turn 2, but your opponent doesn't really give you a window to play it, then you're kind of just -1 card for the entire game. And the point of one-ofs and the point of this deck is to increase your chances of having a good spell, a good reaction, a good answer to whatever your opponent is doing without being super bricky or having these cards in your hand that don't do anything unless you're in that specific spot. So they're for spots that are common enough that you would like to have a card for it, but not so common that you're going to encounter it every single game or on multiple turns in a game, so these cards are in great, right? So that's why they're one-ofs. Charm is the same way in Lee Sin, especially when we're playing this Protect the President Lee Sin variant, so we don't even have a whole lot of units being down or a whole lot of times where it is going to be extremely good. Having Charm for a Lee Sin, or to pull into your big Lee Sin in the mid to late game, is going to be very good because you can oftentimes pull in a Kaisa, pull in a Darius that's already been readied and then gotten value and backed up and all this stuff. Charm and those spots are going to be very good into a lot of decks where you, again, can attack up with the Lee Sin into Sett, for example. You attack up with your Lee Sin, you kill their Sett, they, spin the buff token, tap their Sett, legends, recycle a rune, and you go, okay, cool, charm your Sett up here anyways, kill it again, is really nice. But you're not in spots like that every game when you're playing against things like the Master Yi decks, the Kaisa decks, the Darius decks, like Victor decks. Charm just doesn't have a lot of extremely good targets. And we are playing a Blitzcrank down here, which is like pseudo Charm. So we'll go over Blitzcrank in a bit, but it's basically the same thing. So you kind of are playing 2 Charm in a way, except one is going to be better in most spots than the other one. Blitzcrank is going to be better in most spots than in Charm. Next we have Pit Rookie. So Pit Rookie, 2 energy, 2 might unit. When you play me, give another friendly unit a buff token. This is in here for 2 reasons. One, because it's a nice way to just say, okay, your Lee Sin's already in play. Cool, here's 2 energy. I'm going to develop another unit and then also continue to protect my president and make him really big. It's a really solid tempo play if you can do things like turn 2, play a Kiana. If you have to go first, it's really good, because what Pit Rookie does when going first is it allows you to buff your unit that you played and then still have the Lee Sin legend ability to then buff the Pit Rookie or buff something else. Pit Rookie is just a good way to say, hey, you made me play on even numbers, which kind of sucks for me. I had to play Kiana on turn 2 with not a way to buff it. You didn't kill her, so now I'm going to untap everything, play a Pit Rookie. I buffed my Kiana, and I still have 3 energy and developed a unit to, again, continue my board pressure, do a lot of stuff that way. It's really nice onto a Star Warp Poro. It's nice onto the Sunlit Guardian. Again, if you're on a go second curve, you can Sunlit Guardian on turn 1 because it's a 3 energy unit. On turn 2, you immediately play a Pit Rookie, and you still have 3 energy left to be able to interact with whatever your opponent is doing, whether that 3 energy is a some sort of pump spell or buff spell or a defy or whatever. It's really nice to be able to start fighting for battlefields and taking over that point tempo and fighting for point tempo. Next is Stalwart Poro. This is, again, a very solid 2-drop unit, so this is to make sure that we have decent numbers to play when going second on 3 runes. We can play a 2 energy unit on turn 1 and then immediately buff it with our Lee Sin legend. So we effectively get to play a 3 might Stalwart Poro, which is 2 energy, 2 might, shield 1. And then it is going to be a 4 might Defender, which right now is actually a fairly good number. 4 might is going to beat Noxus Hopefuls. 4 might beats a Kaisa that's accelerated. 4 might beats like any Victor unit. This is going to be really good anti-Victor tech. Your aggro units, 4 might is going to be usually pretty difficult to beat unless they also have some sort of pump spell to go with it, like a cleave most of the time. 3 might on the base Poro doesn't really change much from 2 might, but all in all, it is quite nice. And again, 4 might overall is going to be a really big break point for a lot of decks in the meta right now with the buff Poro in this one. Next spell, or next card, is going to be Discipline. Discipline is a 2 energy reaction that gives a unit +2 energy, or sorry, +2 might this turn, and then it draws 1, so it cycles, it cantrips, it refills itself. So this is one of the best pump spells in the game right now because it is cheap and on rate. 2 energy for 2 might is nice, and then it also refills itself, meaning that you're not going to just be running out of spells. You can keep up in card advantage against the Kaisas. You can out card advantage other types of removal decks or unit decks. If they have to run units into you, you discipline to pump your unit. Now that they've lost cards and the units that killed it, and you didn't lose a card because the discipline recycled itself, if you are on Dreaming Tree and you get to discipline whatever unit is on the Dreaming Tree, your discipline turns into 2 energy plus 2 might to draw 2, which is really good. It's just a very premium pump spell right now. It's being played in just about every green deck because it is so premium, thanks to the cantripping and the rate of just, 2 energy plus 2 is a perfectly fine rate. Next is we are on a singular Rune Prism and then a singular block. I'm going to talk about these cards together because this is effectively one card slot that instead of playing 2 of one of these cards, I'm playing 1 of each of these cards. So if you don't know what these cards do, Rune Prism is 2 energy, 1 power, action speed, stun a unit. So stun means that that unit doesn't deal combat damage for the rest of the turn. So even if they can ready it and attack it again or anything like that, it won't deal combat damage. If they use something like a challenge on it, though, it will deal damage that way. Stun does not prevent, damage from the unit. It just prevents combat damage specifically. The next card is Block. So Block is here. Again, this is the same card slot. We'll go over what they do, but in different ways. Block is a 2 energy action speed as well. And it's also a hidden, so it can be hidden for just 1 power. So you can have 0 runes up and cast or get Block set up. And it is action speed, give a unit shield 3 and tank. Shield 3 means that it will get +3 might while being a defender, and tank means that it has to be assigned combat damage first, which can be very important sometimes. Now, what is the purpose that these cards are in the deck for? Like, what purpose do they serve? What role are they filling? Why these cards? So these cards are our combat tricks while defending. These are really good combat tricks while defending, and they defend really well 2 different lines of attack from our opponent. Most of the cards in here, almost the entire deck and almost all the cards in here, are looked at through the lens of how do we beat Kaisa's attack patterns, how do we beat Kaisa's play patterns, because Kaisa is so strong and Kaisa is so represented right now that you have to think about how do you beat the Kaisa play patterns, right? So the Kaisa play patterns is going to one of 2 things. Usually they're going to come in really big. At this point, when you have a big Lee Sin is when these are good, is when you're defending with the Lee Sin, and then you hide a block or you have Rune Prism mana open, right? Is they're going to either attack in with 1 unit, like a Darius plus Cleave, and that is 10 might, and it's going to be usually hard for you to pump your unit up past that if they're going to do like Darius plus Cleave plus, the Smokescreen. Right, that right there is 8 runes altogether. 8 is a really nice number for Kaisa to be at. They're at 8 all the time because Accelerated Watcher is 8 runes, 8 energy. And they're going to be at 8 all the time in their end game because you have to play around 8 energy, you have to play around Accelerated Watcher, right? So the 8 energy spike can also be Darius, Cleave, Smokescreen, and that right there is a huge swing. That is a 14 might swing. That makes their Darius 10 might when attacking, and then gives your Lee Sin -4 or whatever unit -4. And most of the time, unless your Lee Sin is legitimately so ginormous at that point to where that's still not enough, then they probably just won't attack into it. And like sometimes 1 pump spell gets you there. But let's say at this stage in the game, your Lee Sin is like a 9. Your Lee Sin goes to 10 from defending with shield. And then the Smokescreen makes your Lee Sin a 6. Because you go up to 10, down to 6, into your Darius's 10 might attack. So 6 into 10 is not actually too easy to come out of unless you have the energy for like 3 pump spells. Because your pump spells only give +2 at a time. So even at that point, a double Disciplines only gives you +4, and you're at best trading your Lee Sin with their Darius, and that's not good because your Lee Sin, you need your Lee Sin to live in order to outscale your opponent and get to a spot to where you're just winning the game and they can't do anything about it, right? And that's when you need this Rune Prism and this block card. They do 2 separate things. If that is your opponent's attack pattern, is the come in with the 1 big Darius and then Smokescreen, make my 1 unit really big, Rune Prism is going to be fantastic there, right? You're going to Rune Prism away their Darius, and then this is a spot where Rune Prism is good. People think Rune Prism is good, where you stun their Darius, it stops them from attacking you, and then you keep your Lee Sin alive, their Darius gets bounced back, whatever. That's actually not that great, because now they have a Darius back that they're going to be able to attack for 7 with on the following turn, which is going to be really nice for them, and be a lot of power. So this is where block comes in a lot of the time. So, like I said, usually people do math of your pump spells only giving +2, and that's because almost all of them do, except for block. So discipline gives +2. So if you're on 4 energy, for example, and they're thinking, oh, you can only go discipline, +4, I beat that because my Darius killed you. What block does is it gives 1 additional might while defending, so you're giving it +5. That makes your Lee Sin an 11 overall, which beats their Darius and beats this like super cracked 8 energy swing in for 14 hand. And the important thing here is you do actually kill the Darius, and you stop it from just getting pushed back and coming at you again for another 7 on the following turn. And that's what block is really good at. Block is killing units that you don't necessarily want to be pushing back with Rune Prism, because that doesn't actually solve your problem, it just kind of delays it. And then sure, you get 1 turn where you get to buff the Lee Sin a couple of times, but you buffing your Lee Sin by 2 buff tokens on your turn, maybe 3 buff tokens at most, is not going to compensate for the opponent's 7 might unit on their side of the board, right? That's not going to be great. As well as block is going to be really good if you're defending for 2 units on a battlefield with your Lee Sin. Because what it does is, even if you can't get big enough to kill the Darius with just a Lee Sin, or you can't pump the Lee Sin, giving tank to a unit is really good, because it forces your Darius, or forces the opponent, to kill the other unit instead of Lee Sin. It is literally turning that unit into a bodyguard. It is having that unit tell Lee Sin to get down, Mr. President, I got you, I'll tank it for you. The might doesn't really matter most of the time, as long as, like, you know, you have the might to kill the unit at the end of it. You don't actually care who's big enough to do it. You don't need your Lee Sin to be that big. If you have the might to kill it and you get tank on the secondary unit there with the Lee Sin, and this is why oftentimes I will put 2 units or another unit with my Lee Sin, is because it will give it that tank keyword, so your Darius has, or their unit has to kill your smaller units of the Lee Sin, and that is huge. When is Rune Prison better is going to be when your opponent has a unit, or sometimes multiple units, where pushing it back doesn't matter as much, or in the spots where one unit is just so unreasonably large that no amount of pump spells can like effectively deal with it, but they're not always that large, or you only need to buy the tempo for like 1 turn. And that's when Rune Prison is good. These cards are against like your students, right? Student can have a lot of really crazy hands with Kaisa that makes their student bigger than it should legally be allowed to be. You know, student cleave is 3, 6, 7, 8. That's a 10 might unit, student cleave. So that right there is already bigger than, or as big as the Darius, but that was only 2 mana spent because your student came in on a previous turn. So for 2 energy, your opponent just went cleave, here's my student for 10. What do? They're going to have another like 4 to 6 energy after that to cast things like, if you just go, okay, well, I'll buff my Lee Sin with discipline to make him bigger, then they still have like 6 energy, and they're just going to have either more, they're going to have spells to deal damage to your Lee Sin, so they at least trade, and they don't care about trading their student away because they just want your Lee Sin dead. Or they're going to have spells to like reduce your Lee Sin's might down enough to where it might not even trade, and your student, or your Lee Sin just dies to a student, right? And student is one of those cards where you don't actually care if it gets pushed back to the base, because if your opponent has a hand of like double cleave and they're coming in with a double cleaved up student on a Tuesday, you can stun it, send it back to their base, they ready everything. The unit's only a 2 might unit. You know, student is only 2 might. Yes, they have spells in their hand to make it big whenever they cast spells, they cast the discipline. So really that student is going to be like a 4 might or a 5 might unit realistically. But it's not always going to be that way, especially if they already used 2 cleaves on the previous turn, or like a cleave and a smokescreen on the previous turn. The odds of them having another cleave and another smokescreen to do all of this crazy stuff again is just not super likely. And then again, that gives you another draw to then draw into things like your Defy, Zonias to make your unit not die anyways, a Stand United to make your Lee Sin an infinite. So there's a lot of spots where Rune Prison is also fine for that as well, where you don't care about pushing the unit back, or what Rune Prison does is your opponent has one big unit and then comes in with a few medium-sized units as well alongside it. Rune Prison actually stops the big unit and then will sometimes just cancel the entire attack. This is mostly for matchups like Darius and Sett, where they're going to push in with a really big Sett and then come in with like 2 other units next to it, like maybe a Cythria and a like Trefarian Glory Seeker, or Cythria and a Fiora. So they're coming in for like, you know, that's 6 might in the Cythria and the Fiora, and then we'll say the Sett's coming in for at least 8, if not, you know, like 9 or 12. You can stun the Sett, and then now your opponent only has a 6 might swing into you, and that's just not nearly as good. You kill both units, your Lee Sin still lives. Yes, they have the Sett for the following turn, but most likely the Sett is not going to have a buff, or your opponent invested some resources to make that Sett really big on this attack. So you're again asking them, just like with the student, hey, invest some real cards, show me you have ways to make this Sett an actual problem that I have to care about, right? And that's another spot where Rune Prison is going to be better. Next is a 1 of Wallop. Wallop is in here along with First Mate for the purpose of coming up or making up the point deficit. The big problem we have with Lee Sin, or the biggest thing that wasn't figured out, was, okay, cool, your Lee Sin didn't die on turn 2, you have a really big Lee Sin on turn 5 now, your Lee Sin's like 12 might minimum, like a 15 might Lee Sin. The issue is, you lost a lot of point tempo in the first 2 turns because you probably didn't do a whole lot on turn 1. Turn 2, you played a Lee Sin. Turn 3, he wasn't really big enough to move onto a battlefield to scrap with, most likely, so you had to invest some more cards there. Or, more importantly, you just have the 1 unit in the Lee Sin doing the defending and stuff. So what happens is you get, you know, at least 2 points behind sometimes, if not 3 points behind sometimes. And just because you have 1 really big Lee Sin that's locked 1 battlefield down to where your opponent can't deal with it, you still have to make up the point of it. You can't just sit there and hold 1 battlefield a turn, because your opponent is going to do the same if you're not pressuring the other battlefield. Whether that's playing a second Lee Sin and also making that one really big now, again, that's going to take a few turns. So what Wallop and First Mate let us do is, and also the Mistfall let us do, all 3 of these cards, is they let you move your Lee Sin back after holding, you know, again, 12 might Lee Sin, holds for 13. Opponents can't deal with that. They're just going to ignore it. You score your hold point, you can move your Lee Sin back, ready it one way or another, so now he's ready, and then you move it to the other battlefield, and now you're still scoring 2 points a turn, while stopping your opponent from scoring 2 points a turn. And most importantly, the hardest point to score is that 8th point, where it either has to be a hold, or they do have to conquer both battlefields into a huge Lee Sin, which is not going to happen. And all of these cards, the Wallop, the First Mate, and the Mistfall, are really good at helping you come up with that point deficit by effectively readying your Lee Sin and giving him like pseudo ganking in a way. Mistfall is really good at that because it is just every single turn once you play it, every single turn after that you can spend 1 you like tap your Lee Sin to make him big or something, or you move your Lee Sin back, tap your Lee Sin Legend for 1 energy, buff the Lee Sin. That triggers your Mistfall because you've buffed a friendly unit by giving it a buff token. That lets you ready your Lee Sin and attack the other side, and you don't have to draw a Wallop or First Mate over and over again, right? What these cards also do in games where you are even in points or ahead in point tempo even, is they let you buff your Lee Sin multiple times, because the Lee Sin champion is an exhaust ability, so a tap ability. Is you can tap your Lee Sin to give it a buff token, and then you play First Mate or Wallop, you ready your Lee Sin, and you can just tap it again to give it another buff token. Or it pairs great with Mistfall, where you have a Mistfall in play. You just go, okay, tap Lee Sin to give it a buff token, tap your Lee Sin champion to give itself a buff token, and then Mistfall triggers, you tap your Mistfall, untap your Lee Sin, tap your Lee Sin again, boom, you've buffed your Lee Sin 3 times in a turn, right? And it gets out of hand extremely fast. And that's what the Wallop, First Mate, and Mistfall are in the deck for, is to just help you come up with these point tempo deficits and point deficits in general. We are on 1 Wallop and 1 Mistfall. I will say Wallop is probably the next card to come out because it's not the most impactful, and it's only good once you're set up, and we might be looking for another card to kind of help you get to that point of setup. And the card that I've been looking at and interested in is going to be like a primal strength. We might need another champion to make a president, like a Sett would be good, a Misfortune or an Udyr could be fine at that stage. But yeah, I think Wallop's probably the first card to go here, but that's why they're in the deck. That's the roles they're filling. Next is Zhonya's. 3 Zhonya's. Zhonya's is great. It stops your Lee Sin from literally dying. That's what the card says. It says the next time a friendly unit would die, kill this gear instead, recall that unit to your base exhausted, your unit does not die. Cool thing about Zhonya's is they work with multiples at a time. So if you don't have a turn 1 play as far as the unit goes, you just go, cool, turn 1 is Zhonya's, and then turn 2 a Lee Sin. Your opponent has to now have a Falling Star plus a smoke screen. If they don't have a Falling Star smoke screen, or they don't have Falling Star stupefy, they just can't kill your Lee Sin now on turn 2, and that again gives you just a really huge advantage in that matchup. And it's top of the fact that it's a hidden card. If you notice here, we are on 3 total hidden cards with the block, the Zhonya's, and the Stand United. The more hidden cards you play, the better the hidden cards get, because your opponent isn't playing around the kind of more fringe hidden cards, or they can't play around all of them at the same time. So if you show your opponent a block in game 1, in game 2 when you hide a card, they're going to have to figure out playing around a block is much different than playing around a Zhonya's. And playing around a Zhonya's and a block is much different than playing around Stand United. So it gets really hard for them to figure out what the actual correct answer is on how to approach this hidden card a lot of the time. So that's really nice. Next is Sunlit Guardian, as this is a card, we're playing 2 of it. This is our like pseudo president. It is a 3 energy, 3 might unit with shield 1 and tank. So this is a turn 1 play. If you're going second and you don't have a 2-drop, it is 3 energy, 3 might is nice. If you give it +1 buff token from your Lee Sin Legend, it is now 4 might base, and then goes up to 5 might when defending, which 5 might is a really nice breakpoint, because that beats, that's going to beat the Kaisa with Accelerate. Doesn't even trade with it anymore, just straight up beats it. 5 might is again bigger than anything Victor's playing. 5 might is going to be bigger than your opponent's Kiana's. It's going to be bigger than a Fiora that's not buffed in any way. So 5 might is a really nice breakpoint to check your opponent at. And that is, again, the minimum it's at once he has a buff token. That's not including if you buff it with a pump spell like a Discipline's a block on guard. You make it a 7. You're almost playing like Master Yi numbers at that point, which is really nice. And then the really big thing is it has tank. So tank is a really big keyword, like we explained on block, to stop your Lee Sin from dying. So in the mid to late game, you can play Lee Sin on a battlefield a lot more safely and be able to just play a Sunlit Guardian on top of it. You're now defending that battlefield for a total of, assuming no buffs at all, this is going to be 10 that you're defending with, but the first 4 has to be going to Sunlit Guardian, which means your opponent has to be coming in for 14 overall to actually kill the Lee Sin, or 10 and then have 4 damage on top of it. And this is like the worst defending for you possible. If your numbers are that bad, you probably aren't defending a battlefield. Most likely both of these champions are going to have a buff on them. So realistically, you're defending for 5 from Sunlit Guardian and defending for 7 from Lee Sin. So you're defending for a total of 12, which again, the first 5 is having to go to Sunlit Guardian, and it gets really difficult to actually get over these tank keywords. Having these bodyguards that say, get down, Mr. President, is really nice, which, again, we went over with block. So having honestly, a well-statted unit that doesn't cost a power early, that you can play out and it not mess up your mana curve, is really nice when you're pairing it with the Lee Sin game plan of just simply protect the President. The last few cards here are going to be Stand United, Arena Bar, and Blitzcrank. Stand United is a 3 of. This card is broken in this deck. This card's like not very good in every other deck, really. It's fine in Master Yi. It is very broken in Lee Sin. This card is read incorrectly a lot of times, so people might not understand why it's broken. But it is 3 energy, action speed, spell. It is also a hidden card, so you can hide it for a power and then react with it for 0 later at reaction speed. It says buff a friendly unit and give a friendly unit a buff token. And then buff tokens give an additional 1 might to friendly units this turn. So the first effect, where it says give a friendly unit a buff token, you have to target a unit on your battlefield that this is hidden at, right? So you have to target a unit on that battlefield. However, the second part of it that says buff tokens give an additional 1 might to friendly units this turn applies to every unit on your board. It's a global buff. Every unit on your board that has a buff token gets +1 might per buff token, which comes up sometimes, not super often when you're just playing a few units. But the biggest thing that gets misread is this is not, Stand United, give a buff token to a unit, and then if your unit has a buff token, this gives it an additional +1. No, this is +1 might per buff token. So in the mid to late game, when your Lee Sin has 3 buff tokens on it, and you play a Stand United, target your Lee Sin, that Stand United is giving your Lee Sin +5. You just look at however many buff tokens you have currently on your Lee Sin before you play the Stand United. You look at how many tokens you have, and then your Stand United is going to give +2 to that number most of the time. Or, I don't know why I said most of the time. +2 to that number. So again, if you have 3 buffs on your Lee Sin is 8 might total. If you play Stand United, you now go up to 4 buffs, but it gives +1 might originally from the buff token it gives. So you go from 8 might to 9 might because you gave it a buff token with Stand United. Now you have 4 total buff tokens, so you're getting an additional +4. So you go from 9 might to 13 might. So instead of, you start, again, we'll run back the math. We'll open up good old Paint to help paint the picture. Your Lee Sin has 3 buff tokens. And then, so that makes it 8 might, right? Because you're at 5 might plus 3 buff tokens, you're at 8 might. After Stand United, you will now have 4 buff tokens, 4 buffs, which makes your unit, your Lee Sin, a 9 might unit. But then you give an additional +4 might to Lee Sin because you have 4 buffs. So that makes your Lee Sin a 13. So again, we started with 3 buffs. So if you play Stand United, you give your unit, we went from 8 to 13, which is +5. So you look at the number of buffs, you give +2 to that number, and that's how much your Lee Sin will be at. Another way to check this math is, let's say you have 6 buffs, you're at 11, you Stand United, this is going to make you 7 buffs, you go to 12, and then +7, you go to 19. Again, 2 + 6 is going to be 8, 8 + 11, 19. So this is the quickest and easiest way to do Stand United math when you're playing against Lee Sin and playing Lee Sin. The math gets really crazy. It can get really hard sometimes or be really complicated. But to simplify it, you just look at the number of buffs you have before your Stand United. You add 2 to that number, and that is the total number of additional might your Lee Sin will be gaining from the Stand United. So Stand United makes your Lee Sin just ginormous and impossible to deal with, and it's really hard to play around. On top of, it's just really hard to actually deal with the unit when you do have it. Next, we have 1 Arena Bar. 1 Arena Bar is, again, just to have ways to buff your Lee Sin and start like exploding it. When you start adding ways to passively buff your Lee Sin in decks, Lee Sin gets out of hand really crazy, and it's one of the ways to help, again, with the point deficit and point tempo loss that you're going to be at early, the point tempo that you're going to be behind. If you don't know what point tempo is, I put out a really good article over on tactor.com. I'll put that in the link to the description below explaining what point tempo is. But if you're going to fall behind in point tempo, Arena Bar helps with that because it actually just makes the speed at which your Lee Sin becomes big enough to combat and fight probably like an entire turn sooner on average. So you can start fighting for battlefields and stopping your opponent from gaining points an entire turn sooner, which will make it go from a 2-point deficit to sometimes a 1-point deficit, a 3-point deficit to only a 2-point deficit. That's really manageable to come back from. And it makes it... one, again, accelerates the speed at which your Lee Sin is getting buffed, so if it doesn't die that turn, instead of your Lee Sin just giving +2 buff tokens a turn minimum, you're getting +3 buff tokens a turn minimum, and it gets out of control really quickly. It makes your Stand Uniteds even better. Arena Bar is a good way to give a buff token to any unit you play down the line, so if you play a First Mate or a Sunlit Guardian or a Kiana, it's able to buff those units, give them a buff token without having to invest in energy or invest your Lee Sin legend ability, so you can still buff 2 things a turn at a time and give 2 buffs at a time, which is really nice. But we're only on 1 because if you ever draw 2, it sucks and you hate it and you want to just concede the match on the spot, which is a lot of cards, which is just like this Mistfall. When you draw 1 Mistfall, the card feels broken, so you're like, oh, why don't I play more? Because I want to draw it every game. Because then you'll get a game where you draw 2 Mistfall and you are going to lose because you're playing -1 card the whole game and you hate yourself, you know? And then the last card is Blitzcrank. Tank keyword, similar to Sunlit Guardian. We know what the tank keyword does. We like the tank keyword. And that is effectively a charm as well. It is a nice way to start taking board control, in the mid and early game. It is a way to actually bring your Lee Sin back and still hold a battlefield in some early to mid games if Blitzcrank is, you think, big enough to do that, or you have the spells to make Blitzcrank big. Yes, it will bounce to your hand after getting the hold point, but the important thing is you stopped your opponent from scoring there, and it bought you time to bring your Lee Sin back to attack the other battlefield and again make up for that point tempo loss and the point deficit. So that's the main deck. That is the entire reason for every card in the main deck and in the ratios included. The video is already an hour long. The sideboard I don't have built because, I mean, I have ideas of a sideboard being built. I've tried multiple sideboards, but the meta is changing so much, and depending on the cards, depending on the matchups you want to hit and need help with and how your main deck testing cards go is what you'll want the sideboard in. These are simply 8 cards I wanted to show you guys that are potential adds for the Lee Sin deck at some point. The cards are Spirit Refuge, Primal Strength, Dragon's Rage, Carnivorous Snapvine, Orange Misfortune Champion, the Orange Sett Champion, Udyr, and then Deadbloom Predator. These all serve different purposes. Most of the units are in here as an additional president stand-in, like a vice president. If you find out that you are needing more presidents, or I find out I'm needing like one more president or something, these are all very good options. The Orange Sett, the Misfortune, the Udyr, the Deadbloom. The Snapvine is a one-of. All of these are fine one-ofs in the deck. They all serve different purposes. Snapvine obviously is the board control, tempo play to come down and kill things. It's really nice. And then it being 6 might already, 7 might with the buff is already like a really decently sized body. Misfortune is nice in here because it can untap your Lee Sin Legend, it can untap your Lee Sin Champion, it can untap your Arena Bar, it can untap your Mistfall, it can provide a lot of really crazy combos. It is just slightly expensive and not very big to warrant it, but it also is a way to help you with a point tempo loss of, like we were saying, ways to ready your champion. Will make up so you can attack both battlefields at a time. She also has ganking, so she herself can attack 2 battlefields on a turn, which is really nice. Sett, attack really big. Make guy not die, he can attack really big again. Udyr, attack really big, plus stun unit, plus has ganking, plus has accelerate, really good. Deadbloom has like pseudo accelerate, and then is a really big body with deflect and can be hard to deal with. Dragon's Rage and Primal Strength, Dragon's Rage is kind of like a pseudo kill spell. If the meta ends up in a spot where a lot of decks, or the important decks, are playing multiple champions or units of the same might or around the same might, Dragon's Rage is actually a really good like 2-for-1 kill spell in a lot of spots. I'm just not sure if the meta is in a spot to where Dragon's Rage is really good. If those of you don't know, Dragon's Rage is the signature Lee Sin spell, 4 energy, 1 power of any color. Move an enemy unit, then choose another enemy unit at its destinations, and they fight each other. They deal damage equal to their mights to each other. So this means if your opponent has 2 5-might units, but one is in base and one is in play, you can move that unit that's in play back to base, and if they're both 5 might, you make them deal damage to each other. Boom, you've killed 10 might worth of units for 4 energy and 1 power, which is really good. This is going to be a really good like anti-Sett card, and potentially anti-Master Yi card, and any deck, again, that's playing multiple units of the same curve, this is going to be decent into. Primal Strength as just another protection spell. It kind of fills the same spot as the block in the Rune Prison of when you are getting attacked, it is going to be a really good pump spell, or interaction combat trick that your opponent's going to have a hard time playing around. 4 energy for 7 might is not common. 4 energy is usually looked at as 4 might because, again, your standard is going to be 2 energy per 2 might, thanks to discipline, and your pump spell is giving 2 at a time. So having 4 energy for 7 might is a big blowout a lot of the time. It is just kind of slow, though. It is very expensive is the biggest issue I have with it. But if you get to a spot to where maybe Kiana gets you 1 exhausted rune, you have your Lee Sin in play, you don't need to play other units or anything, you very well could have the 4 energy needed for Primal Strength. And the last card is Spirit's Refuge. Not a huge fan of this because of the power cost early, but it's a very real consideration into Kaisa, where you buff a friendly unit, so you give a buff token to a friendly unit, and then all of your units that have a buff token gain Deflect 1 if they don't already have Deflect. So no, Kiana will not get Deflect 2 and become Giga Turbo broken, but what it does is it does buff your Lee Sin by 1, your Lee Sin champion, and then it does give it Deflect, which we know how good Deflect is on the Kiana. Having Deflect on Lee Sin could also be as good, because anytime they have to try and target it late game with a Cathian Rain, a Smoke Screen, a Falling Star Smokescreen combo, they're going to have the same issue they had with the Kiana, and it's going to be hard for them to deal with it. It might just be a little bit too late in that game. Deflect is really good early. It is not very good late game. It's good early and it's good in masses, meaning if all of your units have Deflect, or if a unit has Deflect 2, it's very good and very good early, which is why Kiana is so strong. The curve I talked about earlier, where your Kaisa opponent will untap on their turn 4 with 6 runes in play or 4 runes in play, right? It's just like not something they want to be at. So if you do it on a Lee Sin, however, they're already going to be on like turn 5 and have like 8 runes in play. So if they have to sacrifice 3 runes at that point, they will still just go to 7 runes on the next turn, and that's not like really too worrying at that point. But it's still a real consideration. Maybe it does end up mattering because 7 runes takes them off of Accelerated Fox. It takes them off of Darius, Smokescreen, Cleave plays for 14 Might Swings. You know, could be real. These are all cards just to try out here. But that's gonna be it for this deck tech. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Hour and 10 minutes long. Make sure to join my Metify. Check that out. Join my Discord. Subscribe again. I really enjoy putting out this content. It does take a lot of time and energy. These are not scripted, but they're not scripted, and I'm able to put out the reasonings and stuff so well because I have spent so much time playing these decks. I put so much time and thought and energy, not alone either. Like Kuvir is a huge help. Presto Prismat, Cass, like everyone I've worked with or work with on decks put a lot of time and energy into these decks. So if you could just subscribe, it would help a lot and mean a lot to me. And it is just a nice free way for you to just appreciate, you know, say, hey, I appreciate this, man. It was nice. It was helpful. Here's a sub button for you. I appreciate it. So that's going to be all for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one.